Hi there. Today we're going to talk about how to help a child who is failing. You know, as a parent, all of us want our children to be successful. We want them to be happy. And one of the most challenging things that we can experience as a parent is when our children are not succeeding. So when they seem to be failing, and we want to help them stop failing. So that's what we're going to talk about today is, how do I help a child, my child, who is failing? Before we really address that issue, we want to address a couple of other things just as a reminder of, this YouTube channel is all about principle-based living. So identifying principles or laws that govern the world in which we live. Because if we don't recognize or understand that there are laws that govern, then we may come up with beliefs that are in violation of those laws. And, that's kind of that definition of insanity, where we keep doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting different results. Well, oftentimes that's because our behavior is in violation of a law or a principle. So we think that if we just keep doing this, or we do more of it, or we do it louder, or we do it faster, or whatever, we're going to get a different outcome. But it's just like, if I held a book and I think that I can set it here in the air and it will float, it's not going to float, it's going to drop. And it doesn't matter how many times I do it. It doesn't matter how fast I do it. It doesn't matter how I hold the book, what angle. It's still going to fall because there is a law of gravity that governs that. The foundational principles that we talk about at principle-based living is the principle of accountability, which says I am accountable for my life. And I can't give it away to anybody else, and nobody else can take it from me. I am accountable for the choices and the decisions that I make. They directly affect me. They indirectly affect everybody else, but directly they affect me. The second is choice, that we have a choice in any circumstance or situation as to how we're going to respond and how we're going to think. Nobody can take that choice away from us. And the third is control. All of us like to be in control, or we want that sense of control in our life, and we do things to try to gain that control. But the truth is, we only control three things: our conscious thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors. So with that said, now let's talk about the situation of I've got a child that is failing. Well, first of all, I need to look at my definitions, because words are powerful, and the meaning or definition that we assign to words is very important. So I want to look at, what does failing mean? Because I would question, is there such thing as failure? Or is there only learning opportunities and maybe quitting? So quitting or giving up, maybe we could say that is failure, but it isn't really failure, it's quitting. Because let's say that I'm a young child and I want to learn to walk. And I try to walk for a couple of weeks and I just can't get it. I keep falling down. So I just quit. I don't try anymore. Well, I don't believe that necessarily is failure. It's quitting. Because if I would have continued to try to learn to walk, I would have eventually figured it out. So I didn't fail at learning to walk. I just quit trying. I stopped. I quit. So in life, what is failure? So if I look at my child, and let's say that my child is 14 months old or 16 months old and they're not walking, and I'm looking at my child compared to their siblings or to the neighbor child, or what I've read about, on the internet or in books. And it says that most children should walk between 9 and 12 or 9 and 14 months. And now here my child is 16 months and they're not walking. So, oh no, my child is failing. And so now I have this feeling of something is wrong, something is not right with my child. My child is not normal. My child is not as good as the other children. And then I may go to, well, what does that mean about me? Because my child came from me, and if my child, can't walk, what does that mean as their parent? And so now I begin to get my value from my child's behavior, and I become anxious about that. And so now I get more persistent with my child, trying to help them and encourage them to walk because something may be wrong. Well, do you think that your child may pick up on your anxiousness, and your child may begin to feel that something is wrong? And now they feel that whenever you're around them, you have this anxious feeling. So maybe there's something wrong with me as a child because my parent is anxious around me all of the time. So maybe there's something wrong with me. And if there's something wrong with me, might it influence me and my decisions to try? Because maybe I'm afraid of not meeting your expectation as my parent. And so it's easier to not try at all. So this whole idea of failing can begin at a very young age with our children because of our expectations about how they should grow and how they should develop. And if they're not doing it in our time frame or the time frame put out there by somebody else, oftentimes we can become anxious and respond in ways that can begin to create patterns at that age that will continue on throughout their life unless we at some point begin to identify that and make a change. Let's take it to an older child. Let's say we have an elementary age child now, and they're struggling in school, let's say with relationships. And they come home from school every day complaining that kids make fun of them, they bully them, and just mistreat them. Now, as a parent, again, if I'm getting my value from my child, this is going to be a reflection on me. So here my child is, I want them to be accepted, I want them to be popular, I want the other kids to like them, because if my child has that experience, then I must be a good parent. I must be doing what is right as a parent. So they come home complaining about that. Well, how am I going to respond? I may come from a place where I believe this isn't right, this isn't fair, and my focus will be, I'm going to go to the school and I'm going to talk to the teacher, and I'm going to get after the teacher because the teacher isn't doing their job, because the teacher should protect my child and keep them safe and stop bullying from happening. So as we talk about this, I want you to just know that, again, I'm talking in general here, because there are times when it is important that adults intervene. But again, we need to understand the principles here, because first of all, if my child is being bullied, is there a reason that that is happening? The answer is yes. Everything happens for a reason. So why are they picking on my child and not picking on some other child? Now, I can focus on the bully and try to change their behavior, but how much control do I have over the bully? None. And the only way to maybe control or stop that is that I've got to be present with my child all of the time when that bully is around to make sure that the bully doesn't bully my child. But what am I teaching my child when I do that? I'm teaching them that the problem is the bully and that my child kind of is the victim because the bully is controlling my child and making my child feel bad. Well, what if I turn that situation around and just looked at, I wonder why my child is getting bullied. Is there things that my child is doing or not doing that attract that into their life? Are there things in my child's personality that make them kind of a target for other kids that have issues of their own and they are attracted and then look for that? So the difference would be I focus on this and changing this, which I have no control over. I send a message to my child that my child has no power because I have to control this. The other choice is I focus on my child. Again, not in a blaming way, but in an empowering way of we look at, okay, well, what am I doing to influence this from happening? And what could I change about my behavior to get a different outcome? If you haven't read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey, I encourage you to read that book. It's an amazing book. But there's a part in the beginning of that book where he talks about that he and his wife had a situation with one of their children when their child was probably about age 7 or 8, didn't have any very good friendship skills. The other kids made fun of him all of the time. Athletically, he wasn't coordinated. In baseball, he couldn't hit the ball. Other kids would make fun of him. Parents in the stands would even laugh at him. And Stephen says that at that time, as parents, they did everything that they could to kind of build up their child and protect him against everybody else, and sometimes would get after the parents who would say mean things and stuff like that. But he said he was doing research at the time, and through part of his research, he realized that as parents, they were getting their value from their child, and that truthfully, when they looked at how they saw their child as not being okay. They saw their child with the uncoordinated part, that he was not very athletic and he didn't have very good social skills. And so they saw that and were kind of embarrassed about that. And they realized that they too were seeing their child as being broken, and that if they wanted their child to be whole and complete, they needed to begin to see him that way. And so they let go of focusing on the things that he wasn't so good at, and they started to focus on the things that he was good at. So the strengths that he had, and they began to focus on those, and they began to trust that he was capable of taking care of himself and to be able to learn how to develop those friendships and relationships with others. And he said, so as he and his wife talked about that, and they made a decision to back off and to quit rescuing their child and to trust that he could figure things out, and that they would just focus on the strengths and the good things in his life. He said initially it was very difficult because their child, in a sense, felt abandoned, because where the parents had always come in and rescued them in the past, now the parents didn't do that. But they were continuing to send messages that they believed in him and that he was okay and that he could figure it out. And they said it was amazing to see the transformation that occurred in his life over the next few years. And ultimately he became the student body president in high school, and he was an all-state athlete and the captain of the football team. And so all of those things that he struggled with, he developed, and they became strengths for him. And so as a parent, I have to be real careful, because if I see my child is failing, I may actually send that message to them and actually reinforce their belief that they are incapable and that they can't accomplish things. One other just quick experience that I can share with you, we have a residential treatment center for teen girls, and we have girls that come to our program all of the time that are failing in school, that are in special education, that have 504 plans, and they have convinced their teachers, their parents, and everybody that they are not capable of doing the schoolwork. And so they make all kind of accommodations for them so that they can pass, the class. And yet, even with all of those accommodations, it's still not enough. So a lot of these girls come in and they're still failing. They're not even meeting those lowered expectations that have been given. When we bring them in to our school, into our program, we're a principle-based program. And we live in a world where principles apply to all of us the same. So it doesn't matter who I am. Gravity applies equally to me. So it doesn't matter if I'm a good person. It doesn't matter if I'm not as smart as the other person. It doesn't matter if I have one leg, or no arms or any of those things. If I step off a cliff, I'm going to fall. Principles of success and happiness and relationships apply to all of us equally. So when the girls come in, we treat them equally, and we have expectations of what is required in order to complete and move through our program. And of the hundreds of girls that we have had come through our program, we have only had less than a handful that have been so conditioned that they believe that they can't do things, that they don't ever step up and do it. The rest, they rise to the occasion. And it's amazing of the girls that can't read, that can't comprehend, that can't write, that can't do all of these things, that all of a sudden are reading books, and we're talking about difficult books to read. They're writing 5-page reports on those books. They're learning to communicate and express themselves verbally. And for a lot of their parents, like, how is my child doing this? I didn't think that my child was capable. So oftentimes what we do is we disempower our children because of our beliefs that they can't do it. So I would encourage you to look at that all of us are capable of accomplishing anything that we want to do in this life. But if we don't believe in ourselves, and if that belief is reinforced by our parents and by others around us, and we have this fear of failure, this fear of not being good enough, well, I just may get to the place where I may be afraid to try anything. And then look where that leads to. I won't try anything in life. I won't try to develop relationships. I will never get married and have a family. I will never have a job. I will never be able to be independent and be on my own because I'm too afraid to try and fail. So I believe that all of us are amazing, that all of us have the potential to accomplish anything that we desire, if we desire it strong enough, and if we're willing to put forth the effort and be persistent long enough, we can figure it out. If you've got a child that is failing, change the way that you see them. Begin to see them as capable, competent, and able to achieve and accomplish. Quit stepping in and rescuing them. It will be hard to do initially, but if you don't, nothing will ever change. If you want them to be successful, start allowing them to be responsible for themselves now and start believing in them. Thanks for joining us again today. Hopefully this information will help you in your relationships with your children and to help you live a happier and more fulfilling life. If you want to know more about what we are doing, visit our website at principlebasedliving.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel.